Thank you for coming, and I'm excited to see all of you here. Man, I did not know what to expect, to be honest, but you've blown away my expectations, so thank you for coming. So, we are in the book of Exodus as a church. We're going through the book, and we're covering the part of the book that the movies don't show, right? I mean, after the splitting of the sea and the going through the water and dry ground, we've come to the place where Israel is in the wilderness, and I brought this up last week. I said it was a liminal space, right? This idea or this concept of they're not where they want to be, but they're not. You know, they've left Egypt, so they're in this wandering space, and they're in the desert. And the last week we learned about the tests. There's a series of tests that God brings to the people, right? And the first one was 3 days in the desert, and they had no water. They found water, but it was too bitter to drink, and then Moses, their intercessor, threw a tree in the water, and it became sweet to drink. And today, so that was last week. Today, they're going to leave the paradise that God brought them to. If you remember, at the tail end of last week, they came to this, oasis of sorts, right? 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees or something like that. So they're leaving that place, and we are in the text. We're a month out. So they've left after they left Egypt and plundered the Egyptians. We're a month from that. So if they had any food, right? I'm sure they brought food with them. It's surely all gone now, and their bellies start to grumble, and they start to grumble. And this is a long chapter. It's chapter 16. If you got your Bibles, you can open it up to Exodus chapter 16. If not, we got it on the screens. But what we're going to be hitting on today, what is the test? So there's a new test, but what is it? What's the test? The beauty in the test, and then the grace behind it all. So what is the test? The beauty in the test, and the grace behind it all. That's what we're going to be hitting today. So Exodus chapter 16, verse 1. The text says this: the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they came out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." So what often happens is when you're placed in a bad predicament, in the immediate, is you look back at your past with fond memories, right? Even if you were enslaved, you look back and you say, yeah, sure, we were slaves, but at least our bellies were full. I mean, that's the thinking. And then God in verse 4, Exodus 4 says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions." So here we are. Here's the test. Right away in this is this crazy miracle. God just said that bread from heaven is going to come down, sky bread, every day it's going to be there. And so the bread is now the test, right? It says, in this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. It's not water anymore. Now, in this story, in this place, it's this sky bread. It's this manna. Here's what the test is going to be. You can read about it in verse 5, but here's the gist of it. You're going to get bread every day for 6 days, and then on the 6th day, you're going to get double so that you can rest on the 7th day, the Sabbath day. And in verse 13, we read this. This Exodus, verse 13. That evening, quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp, and when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." So yeah, I know it's strange, but it says that quail came too. So they've got meat, they've got bread in the desert. And but I want to focus on this bread, this substance called manna. In verse 31, we get a hint to what it could have looked like. If you skip down to verse 31, it says, "The people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed, and it tasted like wafers made with honey." That's all we get, right? What it looked like and what it tasted like. So there you have it. This manna would dissolve in the afternoon sun and rot, and ants and bugs would come if you tried to keep any of it. But the desert heat would rot it. So you were supposed to harvest it in the morning, and it would keep for a while. I'm sure it was rich in carbohydrates. Apparently, there's a modern day. I did in my research this week. There's a modern day version of this phenomenon that still happens when small insects burrow into tamarisk trees. The trees secrete a sugary substance that native people still call manna. That's what they call it. Apparently, it's quite good. Now, could this be that? Maybe, but there's no mention of trees. I mean, it's just this thing on the desert floor, right? So, anyway, it's probably totally different. The point is, the test is, there's daily bread for you. There's daily bread for you, and every morning you go out and you get it. It's there for you, but don't hoard it because it won't last. It wasn't meant to last. It's meant to be daily bread. It will rot if you try and hoard it. It'll stink. But on the 6th day, guess what? What normally rots and stinks won't. And you gather twice as much so that on the 7th day, it really is a day of rest. You really, hopefully yesterday was a day of rest for you, maybe. But it was for me. I did nothing yesterday. I mean, nothing, right? And that's the point. Just this day where you have a day off. Now, this test, maybe you're sitting there and it's like, this sounds like an easy test. It sounds easy. It's not, and you're going to see why in a second. But I want to show you first. I want to show you the beautiful part about this test. Okay, in verse 17, we see this. The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little, and when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Whenever I think about this strange story, and it is strange, but I always think about Easter egg hunts, okay? Imagine, and maybe you've been a part of these big hunts. Like, imagine a big field, and it's springtime, and it's warm, and there's maybe 100 kids, maybe 1,000 kids. Just picture a big city, big field, and there they are. There's maybe 1,000 Easter eggs in this field, and picture, picture these 11, 12-year-old kids with maybe 2 pillowcases ready to just get after it, a lot like this kid. And then imagine a 2-year-old, right, with his little basket staring up at the clouds, just and the horn goes off, and you got these kids it's just right there, right? It's all right there, and they're just going crazy. A 2-year-old is no match for that kid right there, right? A 2-year-old's gonna, they just learned to walk maybe a year ago, and just, maybe they'll get 1, maybe 2, So here's the beautiful thing. So what I love about this manna passage, it's the opposite of that. Like that, worst case scenario for a 2-year-old. Because there'd be manna, just like this. I mean, it's just on the desert floor. There's this manna. And for the older lame person, for the blind person, for the recent widow that has to feed 3 kids, maybe you start at the same time. Sure, the sun rises, and maybe there's somebody out there that's just going to town, gathering. But guess what? It all evens out. For the one that was up right away, they gather, sure, that's great. But for the one, the blind, that are trying to, maybe they barely make it out, but guess what? It's enough. It's just enough. Like for the person that wants to hoard, it's enough. For the person that just barely made it, it's enough. It reminds me of what Jesus said in the Lord's Prayer. Remember the Lord's Prayer when the disciples asked Jesus, hey, teach us how to pray. And he says, our Father, who art in heaven, holy is your name. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Right? Jesus wants us to acknowledge, Lord, I'm looking to you today to satisfy me, to be enough for me today. It's still January, right? We've got New Year's resolutions going. I've got some too. And there's all these, especially if you have social media, there's all these tips and tricks and life hacks that are probably good, right? Like waking up early in the morning, having breakfast, getting 10,000 steps a day, or exercising, or even, I'm kind of dabbling with this, doing some cold plunges. I don't know if you've, some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. Others of you have seen those crazies on the social media. But listen, those are all great, right? Like, sure, that's all, but that is not what's gonna satisfy me. Like all those techniques and tricks and life hacks, or even, shirts that say I just need coffee and Jesus, right? But mainly coffee, right? No. You need Jesus. Jesus is your daily bread. He is the thing that sustains you every day. Every day we can come to him. We should turn to him. So the beautiful thing that I see here is nothing has changed with God. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, he is still the one that gives us everything we need to live that day. So that's the beautiful thing about this test. But now, what again is the test? We need to clarify. Let's keep reading. Verse 19, going back to 19. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of this manna until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell, so Moses became angry with them. Going on to verse 21, each morning everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning." So they saved it until morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," said Moses, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." So, again, here's the test. 6 days you work, you harvest this strange sky bread that just appears in the morning, and on the 7th day you get double, so that on the 7th day you rest, you don't go out, you trust that the thing that normally spoils won't spoil on the 6th day, and on the 7th day there will be enough. Trust that there will be enough to rest. That's the test. That's the test. So how do they do on the test? Well, verse 27. "Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found none." Duh, right? But so what's really interesting about all of this is that Yahweh really, really wants Israel to rest. Are you picking up on that? I mean, this is before the 10 Commandments, where he's going to have a whole commandment on rest. He says, rest, Sabbath, you need to rest. Even out here in the desert, even in the liminal space, he wants his people to rest. He wants the muscle memory to set in. He wants these former slaves to learn how to take a day off. This is revolutionary, by the way, in the ancient world, that God would command his people to take a day off. It's just the opposite. Other gods that people worshiped always wanted, keep sacrificing to me, keep giving me this every day. And here, Yahweh, the one true God, says, no, you need to rest. Stop, cease, take a break. Well, just one day, take a break. And so Yahweh is forming them. It's not just a test for a test's sake, right? God is forming them. But they don't trust. They don't. And can you blame them, right? Before you think that you can do better, let's walk a mile in their shoes for a second here. They're in the desert. This strange sky bread just shows up every morning. It's day 7. Imagine it's day 7, and it's just so tempting to just go out and just see if there's any more to collect, right? Because who knows how long the day 6's bread is going to last. I mean, you've smelled the tent when it rots. It's not a good smell. You've seen those maggots. It's not fun. So I wonder, what if it rots early? What if it rots early? What if it rots, 3 hours earlier than it did last week? What if it dissolves and your family's still hungry? Isn't the prudent thing, the responsible thing, the wise thing even, to just go and check? Because who knows, maybe God forgot what day it was, and maybe there's manna. And what if everybody else's rots and you go out and you find some, and then you've kind of got a monopoly, right? You can even sell it and make some money or barter it. I mean, do you see how quickly humans, we go to sin, we trying to make money off of manna, right? It's just so, the tension is there every seventh day. The tension's there. You could just go out to your favorite manna collecting spot, because I'm sure each family had their favorite spot, and just see. I mean, what's the harm in just seeing and see if there's any manna? But when you go all the way out there and you burn all the calories and then you're there and you see that there's no manna, who are you mad at? Well, God. You're mad at God. And probably kicking yourself a little too. But God told you. God said there's not going to be any. It's the seventh day. I want you to rest. There's not going to be sky bread. If you remember the test last week with the water, what God says is, if you listen to my commands and do what is right in my eyes. What's good in God's eyes is to trust him and do the hard thing and rest. It sounds so easy, but it's so hard, because what's good in our eyes is to create our own wisdom. Let me look out for me and mine, right? I'm going to trust. If I'm going to trust anybody, I'm going to trust myself and provide for my family. But this is why we need the tests. It's to check our hearts. Who's in charge? You or God? Right? That's what this test is getting at. When you have a test like this, you see real quickly who is in charge. Right? Because you could say all day, God's in, yes, God's in, and then come the seventh day. It's a test is the revealer, friends. We don't like them. I don't like them. But they do reveal our hearts and show you, if you're humble enough to see it, show you what you really, truly believe. Reading on in verse 28, after people failed the test and went out and searched for manna on the seventh day, verse 28 says, then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commands and instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you a Sabbath. That is why on the sixth day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the seventh. No one is going to go out. Now let's talk about point number 3, my favorite subject to talk about, grace. Grace. Because how does this chapter end, right? It's this strange chapter. Well, let me paint you a picture, okay? Let's fast forward in the story. Israel's made it to the promised land. David's son Solomon builds a temple for the Lord equipped with the Holy of Holies. This is where the Spirit of God dwells with his people in the temple, inside the Holy of Holies, inside the Ark of the Covenant. Now, inside the Ark, okay, I'm trying to paint you a picture. Inside the Ark, God told Israel to keep a few things in there to remind them, to remember things that so easily they're going to forget. There's Moses' staff, right, that Moses has used to split the water, and you'll see that staff comes in handy a few other times. So there's Moses' staffs in the ark. There are 2 tablets that Moses, in a few chapters from now, God's going to write the 10 Commandments with his finger in there. There's 2 tablets. The law, representing the law, the 2 tablets are in the Ark of the Covenant. But you know what else is in there? A jar of manna is in there. The text says that one jar lasted generations. Now what's important to note is we are told it's the first thing that's supposed to go in the ark. So right now we're in Exodus chapter 19. The plans, the law isn't here quite yet. That's Exodus 20. The plans for the tabernacle of how to, this tent and all it's basically a moving temple. That hasn't come yet. The ark hasn't come yet. But it says that when the ark comes, you're supposed to gather in a jar an omer, I don't know, put a lid on it or something, and it'll keep. It's going to keep. It's going to keep because as long, for 40 years, as long as the Israelites were in the wilderness, the manna sustained them and was there the whole time, clear up till the promised land. Let's just read verse 32. Moses said, "This is what the Lord commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." It's significant. It's a significant statement that about the nature of God and the nature of his covenant with Israel, that before the law, literally before the law, and Moses putting these 2 stone tablets with the 10 Commandments in them, and whoever the high priest, well, it'd be Aaron the high priest, when he opened that up and he's putting the 10 Commandments in, that he saw the jar. He saw the manna. So before law comes grace. God's loving, caring mercy goes first. They grumbled about their stomachs, being hungry. God gives them manna. They fail. And the story isn't so they saw, they failed, and God took away the manna. No. Every single day he provided. Every single 7th day. It was an invitation to say, are you going to trust me again? Are you going to trust that I am enough? Every 7th, it's sort of like what we do here. Every week we gather. And we remind you, God is enough. Are you going to trust that he is the one that sustains, that he is the one in control? You may think you're in control. You're not. God is the one. And he will provide exactly what you need every single day. There's grace before everything. The jar of manna in the ark tells me we're going to fail. We're not going to trust God. We're going to go our own way. We're going to follow our own logic. Our ability to justify our own sin ceases to amaze me anymore. That jar of manna reminded them of all of that. I love that jar of manna in the ark, that it was first. Friends, that's good news. If you came here this morning to hear good news, that's it. The jar of manna was first. But what about you, right? What do you find hard to trust God about? What's your manna that you worry about, that's on your brain right when you wake up, that you're wondering, is he gonna provide? Is he gonna do it? Can you trust God for whatever that is. That he really does give you your daily bread, our daily bread. How about I'll ask you to stand and I'll pray us out of here. Oh, Heavenly Father, I thank you again and praise you for this day. Thank you that we could gather in this warm place on a very cold day. And God, thank you for your tests that come into our life, that kind of gives us a heart check. They're not fun. They're never fun. Help us to turn to you. And God, thank you for your grace, your mercy in our lives. Your grace comes first, grace that is greater than all our sin. Thank you. And now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be all the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever and ever. Amen. Amen.